We're going to talk in this half hour with our good friend of the show. We are, Sarah Jones is, as you probably know by now, she's been on enough, is editor in chief of Politicus USA. She joins us frequently to add a much needed perspective to my feeble mutterings. And before we get to Sarah, though, we're going to play this clip. And this clip is a clip of former Watergate prosecutor Jill Wine Banks talking about President Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter.
Okay, Jill, let me start with you. Your initial reactions or your reaction to President Biden pardoning his son.
I am relieved and thrilled that he did it. I think this was one of those cases that called out for clemency. Hunter Biden, first of all, would not have ever been prosecuted for the gun crime, but for his last name. Second of all, he was addicted, and that was a cause of his actions. He has now been sober for many years, and this is a time when it is really appropriate for a grant of clemency.
Okay, and that was Jill Wine Banks, former Watergate prosecutor, and our guest again is Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. Sarah, welcome back to Deadline DC. And what's your opinion of the president's pardon of his son, Hunter Biden?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And
it's always a pleasure to have you.
It's always great to be on your show. You guys, you really know what you're talking about. And at times like this, that is so important. So I just want to reinforce that for everybody listening and watching. In terms of this pardon, to me, the kind of backlash that's coming from some quarters, some pundits, and even some Democrats is really disgusting because, this it was very clear that this was a selective and political prosecution. And even when all of that was going on, Joe Biden was hands off. Like, I'm going to show the separation of the White House and the DOJ, and I'm not going to get involved. And I really respected that about what he, I thought it was unfair to his son, but I understood what he was trying to do. What has happened? Well, Donald Trump won the election, and he's talking about putting very unstable people in charge of the FBI. And, Joe Biden doesn't want his son to be at the victim of Kash Patel's feelings. This man is very irrational. And Hunter Biden was kind of what they ran on. He was a big, they made such a big deal about his private parts and kind of trying to humiliate him, I think, into getting his dad to, not run for office. So to me, I just think that what we are seeing in terms of the backlash to this and the kind of people criticizing it is this grotesque double standard, and really nothing evinces how we got to where we are right now post this election better than some of the reactions we've been seeing to Joe Biden doing what, Donald Trump did for his daughter's father-in-law and for Steve Bannon. He issued pardons for both of them, let one of them be an ambassador. That is not what Joe Biden did here at all. And I just think when people conflate this, it's just getting so outrageous.
Okay.
And
well, I almost always agree with you, Sarah. But in this case, I'm going to disagree.
Oh, okay, let's do it. Yeah.
As a father, I can certainly understand Joe Biden's desire to pardon his son, especially with the Trump administration taking over in January, and God knows what they do to Hunter while he's in prison. I don't even want to think about it. But this sends a really bad message from Democrats. Voters are very unhappy. 3 out of 4 voters said in the exit polls they thought the country was headed in the wrong direction. And I think many of these voters believe there's a double standard in this nation, where the high and mighty get off, where ordinary people get prosecuted and convicted for crimes that the high and mighty don't. I also think that, and you brought up the president, Jared Kushner's father, who's going to be our ambassador to France after he was convicted of all sorts of federal crimes. One of them eliciting a prostitute to go after a business rival or something. But you know, where is our moral high ground for criticizing the Kushners of the world, when Joe Biden lets his own son off? And I mean, the other thing, and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop here. I think one of the first things Trump is going to do is he's going to pardon some, maybe all, of the Capitol rioters from January 6, 2001. And how are we going to criticize that massive malfeasance of justice when, we supported our president pardoning his own son? I just think it's really bad politics and reinforces an image that people have of the Democratic Party that is going to cause us real political problems.
So I hear everything you're saying, and you make really good points. I'm not sure what the right answer is to this, but one thing I know that is the problem. This really kind of encapsulates the entire problem that Democrats have in this environment, this media environment, in which is the only way that voters get informed about things. So we are in this position where Democrats are held to this standard way up here and can never deviate from it. And we, I think, as liberals, as progressives, are always pushing them, like, you better uphold these standards. You know what I mean? You better not be racist. You better not be sexist. Like, and I agree with all of those things. And you better support labor, and you better do this, and you better do that. But then I look at, like, how is this translating? How how is it being weaponized against Democrats to have standards? I'm not suggesting they shouldn't have standards. That would be, a sick thing to say. But I'm very concerned, I guess, about it doesn't seem to matter what Democrats do. Like, no matter how well they play the game or how much, look at Joe Biden was pushed out of the election when he was doing everything the right way. And I just don't know if the entire battle zone is in a place that we don't understand. Like, we're not playing for the image is already lost because the image is being crafted by the media, and the media is all owned by right-wing billionaires. So how are Democrats ever going to get a good message across? But I totally agree with your point that people see the justice system and the entire system in the United States as being very unfair and only benefiting the elites. And I think the Democrats do suffer from that. And part of that was when they let their donors, elite donors, push Biden out, and who the voters had chosen, like whether or not he was going to lose the entire election for them or not. That was a very strange moment for the party, and I think a reckoning is called for sure.
Let me ask you the question. Let's say Trump does support all or some of the Capitol rioters from the infamous January 6th day. And of course, I'm sure he's going to say something. Well, if Joe Biden can pardon his son, I can pardon these clowns. How do you respond to that?
I think Democrats are going to need to come back and start being a little bit like Republicans. They always come up with a message. Look at Mitch McConnell. He never answers the question. He always responds with the agenda that he has. So as a Democrat, we're talking about people who tried to overthrow the United States government. That's not the same thing as somebody who is a drug addict and it, or I think it could even be better than that when you don't even bring that up. Just we're talking about people. Why don't you love America? How about that? Why don't you love America? Why do you support people who are trying to take down the United States of America?
I'm going to have to interrupt you. We have to take a break now to give our radio listeners a little vacation. We'll be back with more of Sarah Jones, the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA, right after this message with more stimulating conversation, I hope. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guest is a good friend of the show, Sarah Jones, the editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. Sarah, you have a unique perspective on campaigns and elections because you live and work in a battleground state, Pennsylvania. So I'm going to ask you this question. There's been a lot of conversation, which I've contributed to, about what Democrats have to do differently to do better in elections. And ground zero for the Democratic failure this time was the Keystone State. Vice President Harris lost Pennsylvania to Donald Trump. And also, importantly, we lost a U.S. senator, a great, really great United States senator who I liked a lot, Bob Casey Jr., to a Republican challenger. And the Republicans now have a 53-47 margin in the Senate for the president, the new president or president-elect or whoever he is, to work with. So let me ask you a question. What went wrong in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think it was a number of things, but when you step back and kind of look at it, this might be a unique situation. Pennsylvania might, if Joe Biden, native son, had been running, I think things might have been very different for Democrats in this state. I'm not saying that's true for any other state, but this state is very sensitive to that issue. And the other thing is Joe Biden, being a white, older white man, was really able to cut into Trump's, rural white county support here in Pennsylvania, which did not happen with Harris. Biden got like 2 to 4 points over Hillary Clinton's numbers in those counties because he appealed more to those older white rural male voters who, sorry, I'm very tired of hearing about, but nonetheless, this is how you win this state. So,
Yep.
We saw the numbers look very much like Clinton's numbers. And then we also saw Harris trying to use Philadelphia as the kind of saving grace for Pennsylvania. And that's not how Pennsylvania has been won by people, who win the state, a statewide election.
And the turnout in Philadelphia was down from where it was in 2020.
Exactly. So there are, and I don't know, I mean, the stuff that Harris faced, the sexism, which I think was the biggest issue, and of course racism, but we had Barack Obama. So I think the biggest hurdle is being a woman, and that seems to be too much for many, many voters. So, Bob Casey lost by, I think it was like a little more than 16,000 votes. And if Joe Biden was top of the ticket, I don't think that would have happened, or somebody else from Pennsylvania, like if Josh Shapiro had been the VP pick. And I know why.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I understand the arguments against him. I'm just saying, initially I thought, yeah, he's a really good pick because they need Pennsylvania, and he would deliver Pennsylvania. He's very popular here with moderates.
I'm going to have to cut you off there again, Sarah, because we got to bring back our radio listeners. We'll be back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon and our guest, Sarah Jones from Politicus USA, right after this very quick break. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I'm joined in this half hour by my good friend, Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. Sarah, let me start you off with one of our favorite topics. And also, before I get to that, I want to remind our radio listeners that if they want to watch us, instead of just watch us and listen to us instead of just listening to us. They can do that now at facebook.com/Deadline DC with Brad Bannon /videos, or at twitter.com/Brad Bannon, or on YouTube at youtube.com/@Brad Bannon. Okay, Sarah, let me get you started on one of our favorite topics. If you look at the media coverage of the 2024 campaign, the exit polls showed that less people pay attention to what are called the mainstream media, and they're paying more attention to podcasts. Hopefully, Deadline DC would be one of them, but Joe Rogan's podcast, all sorts of conservative podcasts, their influence is rising while the influence of the mainstream media is slowly dipping into the sunset. What can Democrats do about that?
Well, Democrats have been really, really, really crappy at this issue the entire time I've been covering politics, and I don't think they're going to do anything about it. What can the base do? What can people like you do? Like yes, your podcast is really important, and I think the left needs to focus on building out an infrastructure. The problem is that billionaires don't want to support the left, and the few wealthy sort of billionaires that there are that are liberals, they're supporting other things. They're not supporting media. The right-wing media is supported by the Russians, of course. We know that, if you were getting paid, was it $500,000 a month or $1 million a month, you could probably crank out a lot more podcasts. Um, we don't have the finances for this stuff, but
By the way, just for the record, I haven't got any offers from Russians yet.
I don't know why, Brad. Boo. Yeah, I haven't either. And that's the other thing is the as you brought up when we were talking about Hunter Biden, the left has they have principles that they're not willing to violate or to challenge, and I know that I have those principles myself. Part of the problem for the media on the left is that we are not willing to sell ourselves to the oil companies to get a sponsor. And so, there isn't the money. You get squeezed out by all these corporate people that are being funded by a lot of wealthy right-wing people and corporations. So I would say that the base has the power and has to take this power to start really giving support to media on the left that tells the truth. You don't want to be propagandized to or lied to, but they need to focus on, let's only pay attention to people who are centering democracy, who are centering labor, who are centering the right principles that this country, the best of this country, FDR sort of kind of principles. Why the left has become, Democrats have become so watered down. It just become such a big tent, which was great for a long time, very successful. Now not successful, huge tent, and what does it stand for? As you were talking about, I think people feel left behind. I think they feel, and I'm not talking about white rural voters when I say that. That's what the media is usually referring to. I'm talking about the people who are out there working, day and night and can barely pay their rent or their mortgage. And Joe Biden tried to help those people, and look what the media did to him. The media is not our friend. It's not here to help Democrats elect people who are going to do bad things to the media, like hold it accountable and make sure it pays all their taxes. That's not going to happen. People need to wake up and realize those people are not working for the values that you support. And you've got to put your energy and your resources and your support behind people who stand for what you stand for.
Okay, does that mean, well, let me ask you this
Yeah.
question. Is all sorts of studies out showing how little attention that people pay to CNN, MSNBC, the news networks, except Fox, of course, their ratings are going
Oh
through
yeah.
the roof, and they'll go even higher once Trump is president.
Yeah.
Uh, how does the media have to adapt to the situation, and how can Democrats use the media to get ahead in life?
You know how the media is already trying to adapt, like they pre-adapted, right? They pre-conceded, they bent, kissed the ring and got down on their knees and kissed Trump's boots already before the election. So now they're already pivoting, like, oh, we need to do more right-wing stuff. And that's exactly why, they keep chasing after the right. The right already has their own infrastructure, they have their own um ecosystem. They have one message and they get it across on all these podcasts that are very popular. They radicalize people. They have the money to radicalize people via algorithms that they can pay for or buy an entire, like X, they can just buy a social media. And Facebook, Zuckerberg's doing the same thing. They radicalize people and feed people to these various very right wing, conspiratorial, non informative, or even disinformation type outlets. I
Oh,
don't know how do you fight that on the left? If I had the answer to that, I hope we would not even be in this situation, I would hope. I feel very discouraged by what the left is up against. And I think now, like, it's going back to you talked in the pre-show, like a little bit about, you know, the Bush years, and I feel like this is going back to that sort of where you're all, you're on the underground. You're hanging out on Democratic underground. You're hanging out on like the places where you have to hide because you're talking about like I want people to be able to vote. Like that's a big secret. I might not support this war. Like that's a big secret. Um, and I think that that is where everything's going to go because he's going to come after everyone who criticizes him, and people are going to um, be shut down, any media that criticizes him, or he'll have one of his rich people buy the media, probably try to buy CNN, try to buy the New York Times, as if the New York Times is critical of him. But that's where I think we can, because it's going to be, an oligarchy, and that's what they do. That's how they keep power. So the left has to keep doing like your podcast. We need more podcasts. We need more people doing YouTube. We need like free speech TV. We need all of, start everybody get their talents out there and start pushing discussions and that's the thing. I was going to say talking points. The left doesn't do talking points. That's the problem. It's really hard to fight back against this like one narrative that the right has when the left is everybody wants to bring their own ideas and have intellectual, like honest intellectual debate, which is great. And I really respect that. But here we are.
okay, well, let me ask you one question. We don't have much time left. But I read an article, I think it was in the New Yorker, about it was written by a former reporter who worked as a canvasser for the Harris campaign in, I think it was Allentown, Pennsylvania. And, she said she started out with the Harris talking points, which was to tell voters about Project 2025 and how dangerous that was. And she tells the story of one person voter she talked to. She went into her Project 225 people, and all the response she got from this voter, who was an uncommitted voter, was, "Why aren't you talking about why prices are so high?" What's the answer to that voter?
Well, I mean, first of all, I live here in Pennsylvania, and a lot of people are pretending to be uncommitted and pretending to be independents, but they're actually Republicans. So I'm not sure that I'm fully buying that discussion. Not that she's not telling the truth, but that the voter might have and also that was the talking point that the media was giving out. Why aren't Democrats talking about inflation?
Okay.
Um, what do you say to somebody like that? How that goes back to the very issue that we have. Democrats are trying to solve all of these different problems. They're actually trying to implement policies to help people. You can't fight against Republicans who have, how many policies are they trying to push and discuss to help people?
Okay, Sarah, I'm going to have to interrupt you again because we're at the end of the show. I want to thank both my guests today, Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA, and also Mika Solna, who is congressional reporter for Punchbowl News, and of course, my intrepid executive producer, Mark Grimaldi, who is truly a gentleman and a scholar. We'll be back with more Deadline DC, so watch for us Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time or the podcast anytime.